So our topic for today is breast cancer. So breast cancer is a hormone-dependent disease and the female to male ratio is about 150 to 1. So the three dates in a woman's life that have a major impact on breast cancer incidence are the following: the age at menarche, the age at menopause, and the age at first full-term pregnancy. So the younger age of menarche, the later age at menopause, and the later age at first full-term pregnancy increases the risk for breast cancer. These factors account for 70 to 80% of variation in breast cancer frequency in different countries. So duration of maternal nursing may decrease the risk of breast cancer development. Other risk factors that increases the risk are the following: central obesity, moderate alcohol intake, exogenous use of female hormones, and radiation exposure, especially patients who have received radiation, therapeutic radiation. So breast cancer is a malignant proliferation of epithelial cells lining the ducts or lobules of the breast. So epithelial malignancies of the breast are the most common cause of cancer in women. So improved treatment and earlier detection resulted to decreased mortality rate from breast cancer in the US. So breast cancer is a clonal disease. A single transformed cell, the product of a series of inherited germline susceptibility and environmentally driven somatic changes or acquired changes, is eventually able to express full malignant potential. So first, we discuss the germline genetic susceptibility. Not more than 10% of human breast cancers can be linked directly to single germline SNPs, or single nucleotide polymorphisms. When present, the relative and absolute risk for the individual developing breast and other cancers in her lifetime are extraordinary. So we'll be discussing two genes for breast cancer who have the greatest impact on breast cancer. So BRCA1 is identified at the chromosomal locus at 17q21. So the protein product functions as a transcription factor involved in gene repair. So women who inherit mutated allele of this gene from either parent have at least a 60 to 80% lifetime chance of developing breast cancer and 33% chance of developing ovarian cancer. Cancers that arise within a BRCA1 mutated patient are almost exclusively triple negative breast cancer or TNBC, meaning they have negative estrogen progesterone receptors and negative HER2 receptor. About 20% of women with triple negative breast cancer will be positive for the deleterious germline BRCA1 SNPs. Risk of breast cancer penetrance is variable and is higher among women born after 1940, presumably due to the promotional effects of hormonal factors. Men who carry a mutant allele of the gene have an increased incidence of prostate and breast cancers. BRCA2 is localized to the chromosome 13q12 and is also associated with an increased incidence of breast cancer in women. Cancers that arise in BRCA2 contexts are more likely to be ER positive. Men with BRCA2 deleterious SNPs also have a higher risk of breast cancer, although most male breast cancer cases do not occur in BRCA2 mutated men, and the risk of breast cancer in men who do carry the BRCA2 mutation is lower than that in women with this genetic abnormality. So who should be tested for BRCA mutations? Patients with triple negative breast cancer, patients with bilateral or contralateral breast cancer, patients with first degree relative mother, father, or sister with breast cancer. Any man with breast cancer should also be tested, and any patient with breast cancer who is of Ashkenazi descent. Since the incidence in this population of a specific founder BRCA mutation is 2%. Other germline genes associated with breast cancer are P53, T10, and POLP1. Somatic genetic changes in breast cancer, or the so-called acquired genetic changes, can occur also in the following genes. So P53 mutation is present in 40% of human breast cancers as an acquired defect, P10 in about 10% of the cases. BRCA1 mutation in sporadic primary breast cancer has not been reported, although BRCA1 and BRCA2 loss of heterozygosity suggests inactivation of tumor suppressor activity in sporadic breast cancers. ER overexpression is involved in about 80% of all breast cancers, and ERB2 gene increased expression, mainly due to amplification, occurs in approximately 1/4 of human breast cancer cases. HER2, a product of ERB2 gene, contributes in the transformation of human breast epithelium and is a target of treatment in adjuvant and metastatic disease settings. So other acquired driver mutations has been identified in sporadic breast cancer. So activating mutations in the gene that encodes for ER, or the ESR1, have been reported in 20% of metastatic breast cancers after prior endocrine treatment, but almost never in untreated primary cancers, or the so-called treatment naive. So activating mutations in ERB2 are also reported in about 3 to 5% of breast cancers. So how do we evaluate breast masses? So examination of the breast is an essential part of the physical examination, and women should be trained in breast self-examination. Although breast cancer in men is unusual, unilateral lesions should be evaluated in the same manner as in women. But please note that gynecomastia can actually start as a unilateral lesion. All breast cancer is diagnosed by biopsy of a nodule detected either on a mammogram or by palpation. So features of cancerous mass are the following. It is painless, hard, irregular mass, especially if it is tethered or fixed to the underlying chest wall. In premenopausal women with lesions that are either equivocal or non-suspicious, it should be re-examined in 2 to 4 weeks during the follicular phase of the menstrual cycle. Days 5 to 7 of the cycle are the best time for breast examination. A dominant mass in a postmenopausal woman or a dominant mass that persists through a menstrual cycle in a premenopausal woman should be referred for further evaluation, including biopsy if appropriate. So this is the staging of breast cancer according to the HACC TNM staging system for breast cancer. So special to note would be that T stands for the tumor size and extension. The N is lymph node involvement, could be either a clinical N, wherein clinical staging, meaning clinical staging, we use either physical examination or imaging, and a pathologic nodal status can be determined by determining the number of axillary lymph nodes that are involved in the breast cancer. And the M is the presence or a distant metastasis that is detected by clinical and radiographic means, or a histologically proven metastasis in distant organs. So combination of the T and N and M composes the stage of breast cancer. So there are actually breast cancer subtypes, and it is one of the most important advances in breast cancer classification. And we use these subtypes are determined by means of gene expression profiling. So the luminal breast cancers are almost always positive for ER and negative for HER2 amplifications, and they are divided into two groups. The luminal A, which have the highest level of ER expression, as well as of downstream ER-dependent genes such as PGR progesterone receptor. Almost universally negative or low in HER2, and they have low proliferative thrust. They are usually low grade and are most likely to respond to endocrine therapy. They have favorable prognosis and are less responsive to chemotherapy. Luminal B, on the other hand, are also of luminal epithelial origin, but with a gene expression pattern distinct from luminal A. They tend to be PGR negative and have evidence of higher proliferative activity, and they tend to express HER2, but not to the level of the so-called HER2 amplified cancers. The grade is more often higher than luminal A cancers, and prognosis is somewhat worse, and they may be more sensitive to chemotherapy. Second subtype is the HER2 amplified. So these tumors have amplification of the HER2 gene in chromosome 17q, frequently exhibit co-amplification and overexpression of other genes adjacent to HER2. And this subtype historically have the clinical prognosis was poor. However, with the advent of trastuzumab and other targeted therapies like pertuzumab, lapatinib, the clinical outcome of HER2 positive patients is markedly improved compared to 20 years ago. The third subtype is basal. So basal are the ER, PR negative, and HER2 negative tumors, or the so-called triple negative breast cancer. They are characterized by markers of basal myoepithelial cells, and they tend to be high grade and express cytokeratins 5, 6, and 17, as well as vimentin, P63, CD10, alpha smooth muscle actin, and epidermal growth factor receptor, EGFR. Patients with BRCA1 mutations also fall within this molecular subtype, and they also have stem cell characteristics. The fourth subtype is the normal breast-like, and they have a gene expression profile reminiscent of non-malignant normal breast epithelium. Prognosis is similar to luminal B group and somewhat controversial and may represent contamination of the sample by normal mammary epithelium. The fifth subtype is the Claudin low. Often triple negative, but they have low expression of cell-to-cell junction proteins, including E-cadherin, and they are frequently associated with lymphocytic infiltration. So what are the prognostic variables in breast cancer? So the tumor stage, the tumor size, lymph node involvement, and detectable metastases. The higher the tumor stage, the poorer the prognosis. The ER and PR status. If the tumor is ER/PR positive, you have better prognosis than the ER/PR negative tumors. If the tumor growth rate as signified by Ki67, if the Ki67 is high, the prognosis is poor. Histologic classification, like the nuclear grade, the higher the nuclear grade, will mean poorer prognosis. Molecular changes such as HER2 new positive, although it was mentioned a while ago that historically HER2 new positive has poor prognosis, but because of the new medications, targeted therapies, it is now we're able to at least improve the prognosis of HER2 new positive breast cancers. So for the treatment, first is surgery. It is the definitive treatment for breast cancer. So the usual procedure done is the modified radical mastectomy, although a breast conserving surgery may be done. Well, it has to be considered that it is not generally for tumors more than 5 cm, for tumors involving the dipole-areolar complex, tumors with extensive intraductal disease involving multiple quadrants of the breast, and women with history of collagen vascular disease, women without motivation for breast conserving surgery, or for women who do not have the convenient access to radiation therapy. Radiation is also a form of treatment for breast cancer. It can be done as an adjuvant treatment post-lumpectomy to decrease the recurrence, and an adjuvant treatment for post-modified radical mastectomy in high-risk patients, for those with T2 stage, those with positive margins, positive lymph nodes. So giving radiation to these patients improves survival and decrease the local recurrence. So another treatment modality is chemotherapy. It can be given as a neoadjuvant treatment wherein chemotherapy is given before the definitive surgery and radiation therapy. Purpose is to downstage the tumor for breast conserving surgery, although the overall survival may not be increased. No? The overall survival is only increased in patients who have achieved a pathologic complete response, meaning when they operated on the patient, there is no malignant cell seen. Chemotherapy can also be given as an adjuvant treatment, and the purpose for giving adjuvant chemotherapy is to improve the overall survival. Patients can be given taxanes like paclitaxel, docetaxel, anthracyclines like doxorubicin, epirubicin, and alkylating agents such as cyclophosphamide. Targeted agents like trastuzumab for HER2-positive disease may also be given for a year. It can also be given as a dose dense in the adjuvant setting, so meaning administration of the same drug combinations at the same dose but at more frequent intervals. It is even more effective, but should be done with GCSF support. So this table just tells us suggested approaches to adjuvant systemic therapy. So for example, in a patient who has a positive lymph node status, whatever the tumor size is, and if the estrogen receptor and the HER2 receptor are both negative, multi-parameter assay like Oncotype DX is not indicated. For patients, either premenopausal or postmenopausal with node-positive tumors, chemotherapy, multi-drug chemotherapy should be suggested. Endocrine therapy is not needed because the ER is negative, and anti-HER2 therapy is also not needed because the HER2 is negative. How about in patients who have positive ER? So in patients with positive ER status, we just add, if premenopausal, you add ovarian ablation plus aromatase inhibitor. And if postmenopausal, you just give aromatase inhibitors. And what if the HER2 is positive? You just add trastuzumab for 12 months and pertuzumab for 12 weeks. How about for node-negative disease? We have to consider the tumor size. So if the tumor is less than 1 centimeter and the ER is negative, and the HER2 is negative, multi-parameter gene assay like Oncotype DX is not indicated. We should consider giving the patient a multi-drug chemotherapy. Also, in node-negative disease, if the tumor size is more than or equal to 1 centimeter, definitely recommend a multi-drug chemotherapy. Again, endocrine therapy and anti-HER2 therapy is not needed for these patients because the ER and the HER2 receptors are negative. Now, in patients with node-negative disease but with tumor 1 to 5 centimeters with ER positive um, type, no? Multi-gene parameter assay may be needed. That is to establish the recurrence score. So if you have a low recurrence score on Oncotype DX and the patient is premenopausal, patient can be given tamoxifen alone. For postmenopausal women, you can give aromatase inhibitor. But if the result is intermediate, whatever the menstrual status is, consider multi-drug chemotherapy plus tamoxifen or aromatase inhibitor, depending on the menstrual status. And if the Oncotype DX recurrence score is high, whatever the menstrual status is, you give the patient multi-drug chemotherapy, definitely. And for patients who have HER2 positive, again, you just add trastuzumab for 12 months. So the treatment for premenopausal patients with breast cancer usually will involve multi-drug chemotherapy. So anti-hormone therapy improves survival in premenopausal patients who are ER positive and should be added following completion of chemotherapy. Prophylactic surgical or medically induced castration may also be associated with a substantial survival benefit. How about for postmenopausal patients? These are patients who are older. No? So do we give chemotherapy or do we give endocrine therapy? So adjuvant endocrine therapy, aromatase inhibitors and tamoxifen improve survival regardless of axillary lymph node status. If lymph nodes are positive, then the improvement in survival is modest, and chemotherapy given to patients with no medical contraindications and who have more than one positive lymph node. And hormone therapy may be used alone for patients with more favorable prognosis based on analysis such as Oncotype DX methodology. So Oncotype DX analyzes the expression of a panel of 21 genes within a tumor to determine a recurrence score. So the endocrine therapies for breast cancer are the following. So for premenopausal women, we can do castration, surgical, or use LHRH agonists. And anti-estrogens can also be given, like tamoxifen, which is useful in either pre or postmenopausal women. Fulvestrant, which can be used in tamoxifen-resistant and aromatase inhibitor-resistant patients. Aromatase inhibitors, which have low toxicity, is now the first choice for metastatic disease. You can also use high-dose progestogens and additive androgens or estrogens. So in metastatic disease or recurrent disease, we should rarely be labeling a patient as having a metastatic or recurrent disease without a confirmatory biopsy. And also, why do we need to repeat a biopsy? Because changes in hormone receptor status can occur and alter the treatment decision. So previously, if a patient is ER positive, in some cases, in the metastatic disease or when the disease recurs, the ER may be negative. So the goal of treatment in metastatic disease is palliative. So if localized, local treatment can be employed like radiation therapy or surgery. If the hormone receptor is positive, we can use endocrine therapy. But there will be some cases wherein the patient would have, the disease of the patient would have poor response to the endocrine therapy, such as those with short disease-free intervals, rapidly progressive visceral disease, lymphangitic pulmonary disease, and intracranial disease. So in these cases, no, endocrine therapy alone will not be sufficient. So what do we do? These are the common agents that can be added to endocrine therapies for metastatic breast cancer. We could either add an anti-mTOR or anti-mammalian target of rapamycin. It's an oral agent. We call it everolimus. And the common toxicities are mucositis, diarrhea, and rash. We could also add the CDK4/6 inhibitors. Again, they are orally administered. We have several in the market, the palbociclib, ribociclib, and abemaciclib. They are now FDA approved for the treatment of breast cancer. So the common toxicities of these agents are neutropenia, and common is leukopenia, fatigue, and nausea. How about chemotherapy for metastatic disease and recurrent disease? Yes, we can give the patient single agent chemotherapy. It is preferable unless with visceral crisis or rapid end organ damage, we can add another agent. Capecitabine or an anthracycline or a taxane as first-line chemotherapy is commonly used. Objective responses with gemcitabine, vinorelbine, and oral etoposide and new class of agents like epothelones can be seen. No? Platinum-based agents also can be given, usually either single agent or in combination with taxanes. They are more widely used in both the adjuvant and advanced disease settings in triple-negative subtypes. How about targeted agents in breast cancer? So these are the common anti-HER2 agents for breast cancer. So the humanized monoclonal antibody, which are administered intravenously, and trastuzumab subcutaneously and intravenously. These agents are trastuzumab and pertuzumab, and the common toxicities are cardiac dysfunction and diarrhea. Can also use tyrosine kinase inhibitors, which are oral medications. What we have here in the Philippines is lapatinib. Common toxicities, again, is diarrhea, mucositis, and rash. Also have the antibody drug conjugate given intravenously, the ADO, trastuzumab emtansine, and the common toxicities are peripheral neuropathy and thrombocytopenia. So there are also breast cancers that are non-invasive, and we'll be discussing two, no? The ductal carcinoma in situ, so proliferation of cytologically malignant breast epithelial cells in the ducts. About 1/3 of patients with untreated DCIS develop invasive breast cancer within 5 years. The standard treatment for DCIS was mastectomy, 10-year survival of about 100%, and breast preserving surgery may be acceptable. So addition of tamoxifen or aromatase inhibitor further improves local control. Although note that anastrozole is not better than tamoxifen in this setting. Prognostic features identifying high risk for local recurrence after either lumpectomy alone or lumpectomy with radiation therapy are the following. Those with extensive disease, those who are younger, age less than 40 years, and cytologic features such as necrosis, poor nuclear grade, and Comedo subtype with overexpression of ERBB2. So in these patients, they may be considered for mastectomy. The lobular neoplasia, or the LCIS, lobular carcinoma in situ, is the proliferation of cytological malignant cells within the lobules. So nearly 30% of patients who have had adequate local excision develop a subsequent breast cancer over the next 15 to 20 years. And ipsilateral and contralateral cancers are equally common. So LCIS may be considered a premalignant condition with associated elevated risk of subsequent breast cancer rather than a form of malignancy itself, and aggressive local management seems unreasonable. So management options include careful observation with routine mammography, prevention with either a SERM or an AI for 5 years. And the third option is bilateral prophylactic mastectomy. So only in this type of non-invasive breast cancer that we recommend bilateral prophylactic mastectomy. Male breast cancer presents as unilateral lump in patients more than 40 years old. Do a biopsy. So prognosis is identical to female breast cancer, and the treatment is mastectomy with axillary lymph node dissection or sentinel lymph node biopsy. 60% responds to endocrine therapy, and 90% fortunately are ER positive, so have a good prognosis. Adjuvant chemotherapy and radiation therapy may be given if not medically contraindicated. So these are the surveillance guidelines for breast cancer patients after primary and adjuvant therapy during routine follow-up. So you should see the patient every 3 to 6 months for 3 years, every 6 to 12 months for 2 years, then annually. What do? You do your history, eliciting symptoms and physical examination, and usually you request imaging and laboratory examination depending on the symptoms presented by the patient. Breast self-examination may be done monthly. Mammogram can be done annually, should be done annually. Pelvic examination can be done annually as per age-appropriate guidelines, particularly for those patients on SERMs. And patient education about symptoms of recurrence should be done all the time when you see the patient. And coordination of care and side effects of endocrine therapy should be done. And if the patient is on trastuzumab, echocardiography should also be done.